sort of get them out of that, but they get pressure again, and the family default takes over. It's just so difficult. It takes the power of God, and like we just looked in 2 Timothy 2 there, they can be taken captive by the devil, and now they're trapped in that. And so this is something, as we talk about emotional injuries, will cause defensive behaviors. And so it takes a long time to talk about all the defensive behaviors. Just list a couple here. Denial. Denial is the defensive behavior where you tell me that I think there's a problem with you, and I say, no, there's no problem. Well, maybe I should listen. Maybe there is a problem, okay? Sometimes we get into, I remember a couple had an accident, and they were both hanging upside down by their seatbelts. I was talking to the man, and I said, there was bad roads, but I said, how are your tires? Oh, I was trying to get another couple miles out of them, So part of the problem was his denial that his tires are still okay. Were they still okay? They were not okay. But, we can get ourselves in trouble with denial or projection. I see projection so many times in people who want to be counselors, and they're just struggling with knowing how to be counselors. If you look at Romans 2, the first couple of verses there, we're told that you accuse somebody of something, well, you're guilty of that yourself. So if I'm a counselor, and let's say I have a problem with anger, which I hopefully don't, then everybody who comes to talk to me, what problem am I going to find in them? They're all angry. Why? Because I'm angry. And so we project those things on the people. We project those things. Projection is such a dangerous part of life. It can be almost anything. It can be greed, okay? And then everybody has greed. I remember, some counselors will study something. They'll study a particular subject, like maybe I remember one situation where this person had studied dissociative identity disorder, DID. Well, everybody who came through his office had DID. Why? Well, it's the only thing he knew, so he's got, if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail, right? And so you smack it just the way it's supposed to be. So we're going to be really careful when we work with people, and just not put Band-Aids and labels on them, because it doesn't really work so well. So many different things: bullying, manipulation, isolation, oversensitivity. I find that in the church a lot. People are so sensitive, people are just hurt. They're just hurt all the time. They wear their feelings on their sleeves. Taking offenses for others, insecurity, getting even, constantly making jokes. With some people, everything's funny. Some people, everything's sad. So we just want to be careful. Short term, those are useful. Why are they useful? They're useful because, say somebody came walking in here and say, your house just burned down, everything's gone. Probably our first response would be, no, right? You can't go, your brain can't go from having a house full of your family pictures and all your family heirlooms to not existing. Your brain needs time to do that. And so when we say no, after we've been told that it is so, what we're asking our mind to do is to take time to process. So defense mechanisms are short-term useful, but they're long-term. If they become behavior patterns, they're really serious, okay? And I look for behavior patterns that I work with somebody. In some personalities, they become really obnoxious. In attractive personalities, they become dangerous. You get somebody who's very sanguine, they get up front, they can control the whole congregation, everybody likes them, they're backstopping buddies with everybody. They can be pretty dangerous because they can impose their faults on people and you don't even know they're doing it, okay? In church, you can hinder the use of spiritual gifts. So is there a way to heal? Well, number one, tell the truth. We looked at John 8:32 before. Tell the truth. If you want to be free, tell the truth. Not always easy to tell the truth, but we really need to do that. And then sometimes I put a little diagram up here where we're going along through life, and life is treating us pretty well. And all of a sudden we get some kind of injury, and all of a sudden, we're down here in pain. We got some really serious pain. And then we start popping Advil or something or whatever, okay? And what we're trying to do is get back up here again. Most of the time, we have to go into deeper pain before we can begin the healing journey to get back up here. Okay, so take pain, real pain. So if you go to the dentist and have a paper there and you need a root canal, well, probably going to be more pain before this thing gets healed. And so what we're doing here in this little diagram is coping. This is coping. We find some ways to cope. Some people live their whole life coping. Ask them how they're doing. Well, I'm kind of coping right now. You can live your whole life coping, or else, because we don't want to go through the extra pain, but you're going to tell the truth about the fact that maybe you are a greedy person or an angry person, and get down here and get it resolved, so we can begin a healing journey. So the other thing is we can maintain an idealized self-image of ourselves. Sometimes you talk to people about their parents and they just say, my dad did everything right. Is that true? My dad didn't do everything right. I'm a dad, I did not do everything right. My sons are dads, they don't do everything. There's nobody that does everything right. So when somebody colors a picture that can't be true, we're not doing so well. Okay? So number 2, experience pain. I usually turn to Genesis 45, remember Genesis 45, Joseph. And when he meets his brothers, what does he do? Who knows? He wails. Yeah, he cries so loudly that the palace hears him cry. It is okay to experience that pain and acknowledge the offense. And that's what he does. He says, I'm Joseph, whom you sold. He doesn't say it's okay. They did that. I'm Joseph. Remember, you sold me. That's pretty painful. But we need to experience that pain, feel the hurt, grieve the loss, but then forgive. Okay? Forgive the offender as Jesus did. Then we need to confess. And you can say this in the wrong order. I guess there are different orders in which you could have. Confess means to say what God says. So you look at the whole situation, you say, look, this is what God says in Psalm 51. David says, against God I have sinned. Okay, and then we begin a healing journey, our injuries become scars, and we can have a restored function. How do we know if we're healing, or if the other person's healing? When the defensive behaviors start subsiding. When the defenses start going away, now we know some healing has happened because they're not defending themselves so much anymore. Okay, and then we can rebuild. Rebuild relationships as a new healed person, and this is the joy that we want to see. So injuries are designed by God to break us so He can use us. And this is the part we don't like to think about, that God does want to break us so we can be broken people. Jesus says, whoever falls on this stone shall be broken, on whomever the stone falls will be ground to powder. So we want to make sure we get that right. We want to make sure we fall on the stone, which is Christ. I don't know anything about horses. Worked with cows for years, but horses, I don't know. But I'm told that horses that are not broken are dangerous, and horses that are broken are obedient. And so I think it's the same way with us. So we have to ask ourselves: are you broken? Are your injuries healing, or are you still wounded? And of course, we have Saul and David as the example, where Saul throws spears. Did David throw them back? Did David throw spears at Saul? No. And this is where you see the difference between a wounded person who will throw spears and a broken person who will not throw the spears back. So,
Lord, you're wonderful, sound good.
I think that's what I'm going to say about that handout. Any questions or comments about that one? Well, as you're thinking, as I was, in fact, I put this on a blog today, that God uses broken people and sort of a test us to see if we're broken or not. So if you're defensive, you're not broken. If you're offended, you're not broken. Is it possible that we could be unoffendable? Is it possible that God could heal us so much that no matter what you say about me, I will not get offended? That'd be take a lot of spirit, wouldn't it?
Say that again, broken people, and what's the other one, are not offended?
Okay, I'm saying if you are offended, then maybe you're not broken,
Right.
okay?
And the other one is,
The first one I said is if you're defensive, you're not broken, okay? If you're constantly defensive, probably you haven't been broken. And broken is a word we don't like. There's a bad brokenness in which somebody has abused us and hurt us, and so we're just broken down. But there's a good brokenness where we become sensitive to the leading of the Spirit, and we become sensitive to what God wants us to do. And that's a good brokenness, where we are willing to yield ourselves. If you're throwing spears, you're not broken. If you're stuck in being sure that you're right, you're not broken. If you're telling your story over and over and over again, you're probably not broken. This is something I see when you get working with someone who will tell their story to everybody they see. It's okay to hear that story. It's okay to understand their story. But when you find out that they told 10 other people the story, probably we're not going to have much success. Okay, trying to bring healing to that person. Because somehow they're going to prove that they're right, they're going to prove that you're wrong, and they're going to try and get so many people on their side to make sure that they know that you are wrong. If you're building walls, you're probably not broken. We talked about boundaries and walls and how they're different. There's so many of these possibilities here. So any questions, comments about emotional injury and healing wounds and stuff? Are we going too fast? No? Okay. All right, then I guess we'll move to the communication. And we have two approaches to communication. There should be two pages of that, is that right? You have 2 pages. Let's start with the one that has communication in capital letters, okay? So with that one, we're looking at what's called a linear approach. And we'll take a look at some of the factors here, then we'll take a look at how it works. So if the people who put this together are right, then your words are only 7% of what you're communicating. Is that true? The tone of voice is 38%. Body language might be 55%. So your words, the way you say things is more important than what you say, apparently. So we experience communication. Most of the communication we have is with ourselves. Most of our communication goes on up here and down here in the heart. There's a lot of communication, and then we have to ask ourselves, are we telling ourselves the truth, or are we trying to be defensive internally? We have communication with other people, and of course we have communication with God. So as we talk about effective communication, we want to listen to people. Probably this is where most of us struggle the most, okay? Listening, actively listening, so you're paying attention, and sometimes when people want to talk about situations kind of involved, I'll tell them, hey, I'm going to make some notes here, because if they start giving me names of brothers-in-law and sisters, and I don't know who these people are, I start writing things down. Oh, this is your oldest brother, and your next brother, and your sister, and that's your cousin. Okay. So after a while, I'm lost. So I try to make sure I'm listening, sensitive, trying to hear before I want to be heard. I want to hear, so when I'm talking about Joe or Sarah or whoever it is, that I've got the right person. Provide an unthreatening environment. Don't be possessive. Don't be judgmental. Don't be prejudicial. Try to have an unthreatening atmosphere where it's quiet and you're listening. It's probably good to have a relaxed posture. If you sit there, knees crossed and shoulders crossed and arms crossed and your head down, probably that's not a very relaxed posture. So try and listen, be careful. And then we want to reflect, and then we want to go beyond that into directive. But what is really helpful is, if you want to reflect, repeat the other person's statements in your own words. That proves to them that you were listening, okay? And so if I'm working with like a husband and wife, or a family, or where people are struggling, I'm going to say, and many times you'll get a wife who's just like dynamite, and you get a husband who takes a little time to get where he's going, or it could be the opposite. So I'll say to the wife, now, when your husband's talking, what are you doing? Are you listening, or are you planning your rebuttal, right? And it could go either way here. So what I tell them is, so when you're listening and that person pauses, then I want you to reflect back what they said. So, and do it as a question. Do I hear you saying that it upsets you when this, okay? And many times what we say things we don't really mean, like usually classic example is, so a man's going away to work, and he tells his wife I'll be home at 6 o'clock for supper, and then if she's following the directions, she's going to say, oh, okay, what I heard you say is you'll be home at 6 o'clock for supper. And then he says, no, I'm coming home at 5. And she said, well, you told me 6. No, I didn't, I said 5. So what we're doing here is trying to get the statement to make sure, maybe I said 6 and I meant 5. See, maybe I said something I didn't mean to say. And so if we do this, it can solve so many issues. Even a camp that people were asking me how they could resolve some of the problems. And this is what we did. We just got the communication between the people and the campers to follow this plan right here. So that when you give an order and you say, here's what I want the boys to do, the person who's responsible for getting those boys to do that repeats the order back to you. And you say, yes, that is what I said. That is what I meant. And it completely resolved so many issues. So prove that you heard what they said. It also allows the other person to reprocess what they said. Like, for example, working with young people over the years, you get a young man or a young lady could say, well, my dad is really a problem, And then, so what do you do? You say, yeah, I heard about him. He's, tell me more, right? Is that the way to go about this? Maybe not, okay? So all we did there is escalate this, and then they escalate, and you escalate, and now we're up in the stratosphere, okay? So if the person says, my mother's a real problem, then you can say, I'm sorry to hear that. What kinds of things are you thinking about or happening? So then the person has to reprocess. Oh, okay. Well, there was an incident this morning at the breakfast table. And they say, well, is that every morning? Well, it's not all the time. You see how they're softening already. And so we want to make sure that we're getting the communication there and allow them to reprocess, because if they escalate, you escalate, they come back and escalate, after a while we won't know who's where, okay? Empathize, understand the cognitive message and the emotional message. This is also very important. So the cognitive or the mental message is, somebody was trying to explain something to me recently, I forget what it was anymore, but they were just completely cognitive. They're drawing diagrams and putting arrows here and all that sort of thing. They're going to make sure I get the picture. Right? But when somebody does that, they may not be talking from the heart. They're just talking out of the brain. And so when somebody does that, if somebody goes overly cognitive, what you want to do is say, well, how do you feel about that? They're going, well, who cares what I felt about it? This is what this person said. So we want to get their brain and their heart together. Or you get somebody who comes at you just with heart, she was crying and I got mad and then I stumped off and then, well, all you heard was heart, you didn't hear any brain at all. You don't really know what was the issue. So try and get those things together, okay? Send iMessages. This is very important too. Send iMessages when you're angry or negative. I feel hurt when you misbehave. Okay? I was disappointed when you threw your trash on my lawn. Don't say, you threw your trash on my lawn and I'm really upset. See, that's a you message. That puts the pressure on them. You want to use you messages when they're happy and positive. You want to use I messages. Does this make any sense? When it's negative, then put the focus on yourself. Okay, I feel badly when it's something like, you did a great job on your speech, you can tell a student. Or you are the best neighbors in the world, right? I'm not saying I'm sure happy that we have you for our neighbors. That's an I message, right? But if I say you are very good neighbors, just making, anybody still here? Okay. Little girls and little boys have different kinds of communication styles. If you raise children, you may have noticed this. Little girls are oftentimes using intelligible speech, and little boys seem to have ways of communicating things with noises and other ways. Let's see. I want to put another part of this approach to communication up here. And so what we're going to look at is a linear model. A linear model means that you have an idea, and you want to get that idea to somebody over here. How do you do that? How do we get idea to equal idea? Well, you have to find some way to code your idea. You have to know what you want to say, and you have to find some way to code that idea. And coding it means you're going to put it into language. Do you know the language? Well, it'll help if you know the language. Last evening, Lois and I were talking to a young lady, and she said, well, she studied Greek and she studied Latin, and now she wants to study Spanish. How amazing is this? She's going to learn how to code things in all those different languages. She's talking to somebody who doesn't know English, well, she can code it into Spanish. Okay? And then the person over here who hears it has to decode it. Okay? They have to decode it so that it becomes what they want to say. Now, of course, going across here, this can happen on the phone, this can happen on email, this can happen in a written exchange, and there's places for this to go wrong, right? So when we get over here, how do we know that idea equals idea? So we have to work hard at this to make sure that idea actually does equal idea, or we're not really communicating. All right, that usually takes an hour, but that was 10 minutes. Any questions about a linear model of communication? We do it every day. We talk. We code the ideas into, and if you know different languages, the ideas will come to you in different languages. Growing up, my mother often spoke Pennsylvania Dutch to us, and so many things I think about come to my mind in that language. So then, when I communicate it in English, I have to decode it up here and put it in something that makes sense. Okay. All right, let's look at the front page of that. This is kind of a fun study. Okay, so PAC model is something I always enjoy talking about with students. Within each of us, there are three persons. There's a parent, and an adult, and a child. Okay? And we can speak from those perspectives. We can speak from the parent perspective, the adult perspective, or the child perspective. And we want to be careful how we do that. And if we think about this, it can go a long, long way in understanding how to communicate. So we have you, a parent, and you're also an adult, and you speak from that perspective. And so we have other persons we're talking to, and they can speak from those perspectives, and we can speak to them with those perspectives. So the parent is very positive. There's a lot of zeal, instruction, direction, warning. If you have children, or if you're on a job and you tell people how to do things, many times it's a parent approach, because you're telling somebody who does not know. The negative side of the parent, is that it can be control. It can represent insecurity or blame or accusations. Okay, so there's a positive and a negative with the parent. Have you heard of this before? Some of you have heard of it before? No? Okay. It's a very fascinating approach, so we'll see if we can make it kind of fun here. Okay. The child also has positive features. The child's positive features can be playful, carefree, de-stress, have fun, don't hold a grudge, be creative, uninhibited, so on and so on. The child also can be very negative. Children, they want their way, and the child approach, they don't want their way. They can accept blame when they're not guilty. They can be immature, they can lack development, act helpless, and so on. Like we just looked at in 2 Timothy 2, there's some child stuff in there, right? This person has to allow things to happen to them they shouldn't have. The adult is always positive. The ideal here is that we speak to people, hopefully we speak adult to adult. So as a teacher, am I speaking to you adult to adult? Or am I speaking, what? I'm supposed to know more than you do, doesn't mean I do. Am I speaking parent to adult? Because I do know more than whoever's listening. Is that possible? What if I start speaking parent to child? What if I start saying, you know, if you people don't soon straighten up, I'm gonna have to, like, does that work pretty well when you're teaching? Not so well, okay? So what if somebody does speak to your parent to child? Maybe your boss, you know, I told you 6 times not to do that, right? You know, you see how they're talking down? And then what do? You say, you know, well, if you tell me to do it the right way the first time, I wouldn't have to do this, right? So you can act like a child. You see how this is so much fun. I like to spend a half an hour on it and tell the students, I want you to start listening to conversations and come back tomorrow with no names attached, but tell us what happened, okay? Who said what, and so on. I remember one young man came back and said, Mom, do you know you talk to dad, parent to child? You know, that's the way teachers get in trouble. So if somebody does talk to you, parent to child, what should you do? Is this a good idea to talk back child to parent? No. What we should do is bump up here, okay, and talk to them adult to adult. If they insist on continuing as parent to child, do this again, okay? I'm not going to keep putting lines on the board. Okay, you see what we're asking them to do? What you're saying is, look, you're treating me like a child, I'm not going to act like a child. I'm going to act like an adult, and I'm going to treat you like an adult. Okay? So what we're hoping this person eventually catches on is, this person comes down here and says, yeah, I think I'll talk to you adult to adult. Okay? And so we can, hopefully with a little bit of care, we can switch the way people communicate to each other.
So, do you actually say you're treating me like a child? Or what is in the case of, I told you 6 times, what's the adult to adult, what's that conversation sound like?
You mean if the boss, if this is the boss and this is you?
Yes.
If the boss would have done the adult to adult instead of the parent to child?
What's your response, adult to adult?
Or what would my response be, adult to adult?
Yeah.
Well, if the boss says, hey, no, we've talked about this before, okay? And remember, words are only 7%.
Right.
Where body language is 55, and tone of voice, which is 38, okay? So hopefully when we go adult to adult, we will eliminate some of that other stuff. So if the boss comes and says, didn't we talk about this before? Hear the question? It's a question instead of an accusation. Did we talk about this before? Seems to be that maybe this is still happening, right? And then if I'm being an adult, I would say, you know, we really did talk about this before, so I'm sorry, I'll do better, okay? And the boss will say, yeah, good, I'll be looking for that, okay? And I'll say, well, thanks for giving me another chance, okay? So we're doing an adult to adult approach here, but there's so much discussion out there that crosses lines like this, okay? And sometimes, without erasing all this stuff, if somebody talks to you parent to child, you can come back and answer them parent to child, okay? Right? See how this gets to be fun after a while? Yeah. And so, this should raise a lot of questions. Anything? Yes, Tom. Or somebody. You might have to come up here so we can hear you. I'll keep talking to you, frame your question, okay?
Can you hear?
Try it.
Okay. Well, what happens when you talk parent to parent?
Well, that can happen. Yeah, you can talk parent to parent. I mean, you can both become the parent, okay? You and your wife, or you and the boss, or you and the neighbor man, okay? Or whoever. Yeah, you can act like, you know, I'm going to sue you, okay? Because you threw your trash on my driveway, right? And, well, you didn't meet my attorney yet, okay? All right, so we're both parents here. We're not gonna be child, we're not gonna be talked down to, but we're both gonna stand our ground. Or sometimes people talk child to child, okay? How would they do that? You tell me, don't make me answer all the questions, okay? Where could that happen? With people who are 3 times 7.
They're still stuck in their childhood relationships.
Okay, they can still be stuck in childhood relationships, okay? What do we know about the child? We talked about child a little bit. What do we know? I know it's time for a break here before long. So what do we know about the child? Can be positive, can be negative, right? What's a positive side of the child?
Not a whole grudge.
Okay, not only grudge, what else?
Fun, carefree.
Okay, yeah, just carefully, okay? Yeah. So where might we hear this? Where might we encounter this? In people who are physically adult.
At a picnic. At a picnic.
A picnic, yeah, sure. Where who cares who wins the game, right? You know, we're just having fun. Right? We're playing with the children, you know, we let them make us out, right? And all stuff, you know, oh, you got me, you know, this kind of stuff. The other place where we often see it is, it seems like ladies tend to be a little more serious sometimes than men, and so, you know, they may talk adult to child, you know, wow, you got your pants torn again, or you skinned your, you know, whatever. Okay, you have to be really careful. Got ladies here who can get in trouble, right? And so men will sometimes just come back with a child approach. Yeah, I'm just one of those dumb little guys who can't ever figure it out, right? You know, just take the approach that, who cares, you know, it's just a pair of pants, you know, we can buy more at Goodwill or whatever. And sometimes, and you know, working with teenagers, sometimes the girls will get sort of upset about this kind of stuff because they're trying to be serious, they're trying to plan something, and meanwhile, the young man is just bantering back and forth, child to child, right? It's just like, and the girls are like, when will they grow up? You know, but they ever encounter anything like this? Yeah. That bad? Not really. I think men use it as a way of diffusing things, and some girls do too. Okay, you can't put all the men in one category and all the girls in another category. That doesn't work. But we can use. Yeah, I could talk for a long time about it, but I think it's something very useful to think about the fact that, you know, we can act like parents, we can act like a child, we can act like an adult, and we have to be careful how we interact on those, from those different perspectives. Okay. Now, so we have some grandchildren who are, well, the 8-year-old is going to school now, and so there's a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old at home, okay, and a 1-year-old. Well, sometimes when, you know, you're just sitting there reading a book and listening to them play, sometimes they talk adult to adult. Oh, you have your house over in that corner, my farm's gonna be in that corner. This is a completely adult conversation, right? Totally. But then something could erupt, right? And maybe, well, I got that before you had it, right? So all of a sudden we're a child, okay? All of a sudden we're a child, and then what can the other person do? What can the 5-year-old do? You know, if we would communicate out to adult, and all of a sudden, the little one's going to go, child to parent, you took my toy or something like that. Well, then if the older child, or it could be the younger child, comes back out, oh, hey, I'm sorry, was that yours? Okay, you see how, you can see this happening to people who are 3 years old. And some people, 43 years old, didn't get it figured out yet. So, if you talk parent to child, let's go over this and I'll take a break. if you talk parent to child, it's many times unhealthy, and it keeps the child process intact. If you get somebody who just insists on being a child, and you talk to them parent to child, you're making them a child, okay? Can be useful in some cases, care for a sick spouse, hurting a friend, warn of danger. I mean, if you saw a child about to run on the road, you'd probably scream parent to child. Stop, no. It's okay to do that. Adult to child can be healthy and safe. Care for a discouraged friend. I mean, maybe you have a friend who's sick or having financial problems, and you're the adult, and you go healing for learned helplessness. I guess we have to unpack that one now. You attempt to draw the child to the adult approach. Parent to adult, like a doctor to a patient, teacher to a student, help to correct behaviors and stop bad habits, something like that. Sometimes you get relationships where one person wants a parent-to-child relationship, the other wants an adult-to-adult. Those relationships don't always go so well, right? So one wants a parent-to-child, and especially you get into narcissism, okay? People who are harmful, people who just are completely self-absorbed and have to have their own way all the time, and maybe the spouse wants an adult-to-adult relationship, and the narcissist just has no idea how to do it. All they know how to do is like parent to child. And so it can be really, really difficult. The child and parent experiences impact the adult experience. So as you're growing up and the way you experience life as a child, the way you experience life as your parents can impact the way you function. You get, what can happen is you can get the parent impacting the adult, okay? So the adult, instead of being a legitimate adult, is really kind of impacted by the parent, and the adult becomes the parent, okay? Yes, the adult. Or sometimes the adult or the parent impacts the child, and so this person never learns to be a child. See this so many times. You get in a home where the children are they've got to do everything right. They can never make a mistake. And life is about performance. So they never learn how to be a child. They never learn how to be a child. They never learn how to be, they don't know what it feels like to be adored by a father or coddled by a mother. They don't know that. It's not part of their life. Well, then how can they function? And we're seeing more of this all the time. At least I am. Parent and child can be places to hide, okay? If I'm always a parent or I'm always a child. Those are places you can hide. Parents sometimes talk to their 2-year-old children adult to adult, right? You want peas or carrots, the 2-year-old is supposed to figure this out, right? And then they're talking adult to adult to their 20-year-old, like, they talk to their 20-year-old parent to child. You can't go anywhere with that shirt. You didn't walk out of here with that shirt, right? Well, that's kind of parent to child to a young man who's 21 years old and still living at home. That's not a good experience. Okay. Jesus talked adult to adult most of the time, even when he was teaching. When you read John 3 and John 4, where he talks to Nicodemus, and Nicodemus, there's a little parent to child in that, okay? With the woman at the well, it's adult to adult. It's so amazing. Confronting the hypocrites, the church leaders, the religious leaders, he talked parent to child. Okay. So, if someone speaks to you, parent to child, you can respond to them adult to adult. This will send the message, I'm not a child, I will behave like an adult, I will treat you like an adult, I will not allow you to treat me like a child. We can experience an adult to adult conversation. Questions, comments?
So if a wife always speaks to her, or often, let's put it that way, speaks to her husband in the child, parent to child.
Parent to child.
How do you correct that?
So,
If I'm observing.
okay, so if you're observing, the wife is speaking to her husband, and she speaks this way. So how does he respond? How does he?
Retreat or, oh, I'm sorry, you're right, I should have done this or that, the other thing.
So if that happens, what has he done?
Gave her the power.
Okay, he has said, you call me a child? That's what happened. I'll be a child. He's accepting that designation. So what should you do? What can you do?
Call their attention to it.
Okay, they may not understand all the stuff that we just learned, but you could ask her, how do you think it makes your husband feel when you say what you just said?
Yeah.
So many times working with people, they struggle to, especially if they have tendencies toward selfishness, which we all have, they struggle to understand somebody else's feelings. They can't feel the pain that somebody else feels. I remember doing some teaching on depression, I guess it was, and this one lady kept calling, and one day I just said to her, you know, do you ever feel anybody else's pain, or do you only feel your own pain? And she thought of it, and then she said, I never feel anybody else's pain. And so sometimes we just have to help people understand that maybe your spouse, maybe there's some things that hurt her or him. Okay. And what do you think? Are there any things that hurt you? Okay. Okay, other questions? Or? Okay, I guess it's time for a break then, so I'll see you at 20 after. How's that?
Yeah. So could you write your address on here?
Okay.
Mailing address. I'll probably send some of the papers to you if that's okay.
Okay.
And you can get them back to them before you can record that they actually did the work.
Okay.
Yeah. So what do you think?
It is fascinating.
I thought 12 weeks of it. SMBI. And then we had Sharon, then I thought it was. Worth Concord. About an hour and a half. Right on Route 30. Stay on Route 30. You'll get to Bible school. Okay, thank you. I think that's it. Okay, good. So what else do you want to hear about in the last half hour?
I remember the question I had asked you last time.
Okay, what was it?
Tell me about the gender identity issues.
Yes.
If you thought any more
Oh,
about
I
that.
did. Oh my, that's quite a challenge.
Someone had asked me about it, and I didn't have a very good, I didn't have any insight at all, really.
Yeah.
I know I'm struggling to understand the concept of what all is involved and what, for the people that it's legitimately a problem for, what is going through their mind. I think media and so on has made it somewhat of a fad.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think there may be those that legitimately struggle with it. I don't know if you had any insight into what is all involved in that.
I did spend some time on it. I'm certainly pretty sketchy on it. I'll be honest about it, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I will, take care of the closing tonight.
Okay,
Since it's the last session.
Sure.
Have a couple comments for the end.
Mhm.
I'll have a prayer then, so
Sure.
whenever you're finished, that's fine, yeah.
Sure.
Okay, very good. Okay, let's see now. We got an opportunity to do child. How am I doing with this thing? Are you doing all right? Okay.
Perfect.
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Your dad's not going? What's that have to do with this week? 5 days. He's still under pressure, he was pretty stressed. I felt bad. Somebody was putting pressure on
And Dustin wasn't, I don't know if Dustin didn't care, I don't know.
him. Maybe he just refuses to.
But that's on vacation, I guess Dustin's on vacation. Sometimes outside, that's not the way it should work.
Maybe us old people just get too It's good and bad about everything. Sometimes my boys aren't uptight enough. Maybe I can learn a little something. You busy cutting deer up, or you have them all cut up?
We have them all cut up. Wait for the next round here.
Put a cooler in.
That makes it nice. Ready for the tribal shake. I'm very for Curtis, what we can have.
I thought he sold all the wings.
And Wayne's after shipment come in, yeah, they were able to, I guess where it came. But yeah, they just didn't let it. Just took it out.
It is just.
That makes it easier. A lot of things happen.
Expensive. At the time, I knew what ours cost extra when we put it in, and it really wasn't that much.
And my electric bill was only, has to get,
Today, I had 4 students today, 4 friends coming out.
Everybody located your place.
I'm supposed to go around, I took my kid, he's around the holidays when I get it.
How do you do that?
It's usually when I get it.
I guess you have it, really have.
The Schiltz having a big Thanksgiving?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're trying to decide where we're gonna have Thanksgiving. They had one truck going to our place, so one had to wash down building there. That's what I mean, there. Shows them. It's pretty good for mine.
In the small section.
I feel like.
The big section. The kids out there, that big section.
But I mean, you have to deal with it all the time.
No, it's gonna happen.
Oh, okay.
So there's enough of a delay. You can do. Yeah. Take 6.
What you said.
A lot of paperwork.
Questions, comments?
I've never heard this before, it's pretty interesting.
Okay, yeah. Why don't people study this stuff? Oh, it's so interesting. It's so fascinating.
Okay, well, as we start here again, Joel reminded me that he asked me to work on a subject, and I did, and I forgot about it. So, let's talk about, he asked me to talk about gender issues and, you know, how that relates to, let's talk about that. How it relates to where we are in the world today. It used to be, that there are only 2 genders, right? So, but that's not true anymore. So now there are lots of genders, and we don't really know what we are, or who we are, or what we're supposed to be. The word sex is what you're born with. You're born male or female. Gender is the way you identify. So you might be male, but you might, there are sort of different levels of maleness. You know, some men are out climbing mountains and conquering the world, and some men are happy to sit at a desk and do bookwork, you know, and those things aren't exactly the same. And how does that happen? I'm not saying sitting at the desk and doing bookwork or being a teacher or is not masculine, of course it is. But it comes across somewhat differently. With the gender, what they call gender fluidity now, just recalling the stuff I was studying and jotting a couple of notes down here. Yeah, you can identify however you want to. You can say, well, I might have been born man, but I think I'll be a woman. And it's really, it's causing us a lot of difficulty, especially in schools where, you know, anybody can use any restroom they want to use. Is that really okay? Or any locker room, is that really okay? Well, it is okay by the way the inverted world is operating, but it is very destructive. So what is causing some of this? Well, when we think about masculinity, femininity, all that comes from God. There's only one God, and he has masculine characteristics and he has feminine characteristics. And so he puts his masculine characteristics in men, puts his feminine characteristics in women. There's only one source of all these characteristics, and it's all God. And so there's some sense in which, hope I'm talking about your subject here, there's some sense in which the only way we can understand God is to have relationships between men and women. Doesn't mean you have to be married, it can be your brother and your sister, it can be friends, but women are going to express a different set of characteristics about God than men are. But they're not quite as, if you take a look at Galatians 4, if you take a look at Galatians 4, these things are maybe not as set in stone as we might think they are. If you look at Galatians 4, you get some really, really unusual language here. Galatians 4, Paul's talking, and in verse 19, Galatians 4:19, he says, "My little children, of whom I travail in birth again until Christ be formed in you." Is that a masculine statement or a feminine statement? But Paul is a man, clearly, and yet he's talking about travailing in birth for these people. And he says again, which means he feels like he has given them birth one time. Now he's got to give them birth again. I think when the reason the Bible uses this kind of language is so men and women can understand each other. So is it possible that a man can have enough compassion to deal with people in a way that's representative of a woman giving birth? Is that possible? Is it possible that a man could have pain in giving birth to people? Spiritual birth, is it possible? Yeah, I think it certainly is possible. And I mean, those verses right there are very, very curious. And Paul will do this other places also. He'll talk about how much I love you. We tend to think of love as maybe a female or feminine characteristic, or even compassion. But apparently that has changed over the years, where, the Marlboro Man, remember those, anybody old enough to remember the cigarette ads on Huge? No, some of you look blank here. Okay. Yeah, some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. This guy wore a big Stetson hat and had probably a 6-shooter on each hip and riding a horse, right? And they had presented that so thoroughly, they didn't even have to have a cigarette on the paper. You know exactly what it was. You know exactly what they're trying to tell you. So it seems like there was a shift in what it means to be a man. Is this tough guy that shoots everybody up and, rides horses and broncos and all stuff. So is that really godly masculinity? Okay. Well, maybe not. I don't think that's what the Bible illustrates as godly masculinity. But then what about Jesus himself says, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how often I would have gathered you as what? A rooster, right? A mother hen. I mean, that's very feminine, isn't it? But Jesus is clearly a man, and he uses that as an illustration. So, as long as we're identifying with clear God-given characteristics, it's okay for a man to be soft and gentle. Is that okay? I mean, we just read it out of 2 Timothy. We need to be gentle and not strong. Okay? Men will have a tendency to go to extremes. Either like one of my students, dad's a preacher. This goes back pretty many years. He said, I thought my dad was going to break the kitchen table in half. He brought his fist down on the table. He was upset with me. And is that godly masculinity, or is that? So we have to be careful as men. We tend to go to extremes. We can go that way, or we can go, like the man over here said, well, if you treat me like a child, I guess I'll just be a child. Is that okay? Is that godly masculinity? No, I don't think so. So I don't think these things are maybe quite as set in stone as we think they are. But for keeping it in a Christian context, what about Hosea, where God says he's like a bear robbed of its cubs? Is that a papa bear or a mama bear?
Mom.
Yeah, we don't usually, I mean, if you grew up in Pennsylvania or Ohio or Virginia or someplace where there are bears sometimes, and you took a hike in the woods, probably somebody said, if you see a cub, go pick it up and pet it, right? Or maybe not, okay? Because you're gonna be dealing with mama bear. And God says he's like a mother bear. And so this is not telling us that there's some level of gender fluidity that, we can just go into whoever's bathroom or locker room or dress, men dressing like girls, girls dressing like men. Some of that, especially girls dressing like men, came with the world wars. The men are off to war, and you had ads in like farm magazines showing women driving tractors, plowing. Why? The men are flying airplanes and driving tanks, right, on the other side of the world. Well, who's going to milk the cows? The women have to do it. And so you had Rosie the Riveter. Anybody remember that one? When you get old, you got to be careful way to think about it. So let's talk a little bit about, if you remember things that don't make any sense to them. There's something that we need to really think about here, and that is, in the book of Song of Solomon, we're told 3 times, do not awaken love until the right time. And what does that mean? Do not awaken love until the right time. In the Song of Solomon, I was going to look and see if I could pick up someone, but I didn't get it done. So you can use your concordance when you get home. Do not awaken love until the right time, or until it pleases, I think the King James says. So when should, that's talking about intimate love. So when should that happen in a person's life? Should it happen when they're 3, 4, 7? Is there a right time for that? There is a right time for that. And what's happening now is, especially with the cell phones and computers, we're getting children as young as 3 and 4 seeing sensual images. And what does that do? What's that doing to them? And it's been going on long enough that we're now reaping the harvest of it. There's something that's called a fixation. This is the way I was taught this, okay? The fixation is that as we're growing up and we realize that we're boys or girls, then if that gets interrupted by somebody touching us or introducing us to certain behaviors, that can become a fixation in our lives, in our minds. And all of a sudden, we're not ready for it, okay? We're not ready for it. And so then, not being not ready for it, and we get introduced to it, and it's confusing. It's very confusing because we didn't know that part of our body was for this. It doesn't make any sense. But then that stays with us as a fixation or as an imprint. Sometimes it's called an imprint. And then we grow up saying, I see this happening with men. They were molested by another man or a boy, and so they got the idea that sexual pleasure comes from another man. Okay? Well, sexual pleasure has a purpose. The purpose is to bond you with a spouse. That's what it's for. Okay, we use it for other reasons. It's destructive instead of useful. Okay? I mean, this is the way I was taught it, this is the way I understand it. And so when we allow that fixation to control us, and yet we know it's not right, and so some of these men will get married and think that will cure me because I won't have this fixation anymore. And then they get married, and then they find living with a woman to be unsatisfactory, and that they go back to the fixation where, oh, this is the way it's supposed to happen, and so they live that lifestyle. Okay, so I think it's really, really important that we are careful that we don't introduce children as I said, Song of Solomon says, do not awaken that kind of love until the right time. And if you do that, the child can grow up healthy, strong, wise, careful. If you don't, it can be a real problem. So I know I worked with young men who had same-sex tendencies and acted out on them. And what I heard from them is that they many times did not feel like they knew what it meant to be a man. So if I don't know what it means to be a man, if I don't know how it feels to be a man, I'm looking at every man to kind of validate me. Okay, can you, okay? And so they're looking at men for validation, and hopefully maybe this person could show me what it means to be a man, okay? Maybe this person could help me understand what it means to be a man. And so much confusion, and it's been difficult for me to work with that situation. So as I told Joel, I'm a little sketchy on how to explain this, but I think I'll stop and see what questions or comments are from you.
So is that treatable?
Is it treatable? Yeah, I think so. Sure. I think we tend to live on what we learn. And so if you learn something that you should not have learned, you can relearn it. Okay. I think we can. Yeah. That doesn't mean there won't be any damage there. And there are people who are not called to get married. Okay. And I think there are people, I mean, Paul talks about this in Corinthians, that in fact, he says those who marry will have trouble, right? So if you're married, you have trouble. Okay. So if you don't get married, you shouldn't have that level of trouble anyway. So, yeah. I think it's important I'm stalling for time while you decide what you want to say. I think it's important for men and women to be able to have healthy relationships with each other, men with men, women with women, men with women, women with men. I mean, there are ladies in my life who are just amazing, and I consider them close friends. They're not my spouse, they're not my sister, they're not my mother, but they're a valuable part of my life because I learn from them things that I wouldn't know otherwise. But the same thing's true of men. There are men who are a huge asset to me because they have insights that I don't have, and they can steer me in the right direction. Like tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, there'll be probably 7 men in our home. About every 6 weeks, I meet with some men, and we talk about just whatever we want to talk about. And, we want to talk now about how to change the culture in our communities to eliminate some of the gender confusion and the sexual abuse and those kinds of things that are happening now. Anybody know about the abuse symposium that was just held in Ephrata Friday and Saturday? Some of you know about it. Okay, yeah. Well, we were there, and how can we bring healing to an organization or to a whole church or to a community where we have sexual behaviors that are not acceptable? Okay, especially adults to children. Okay, it's just completely unacceptable, and it's happening. And how can we deal with it? We're not sure. I can say a little more about it. Lois and I were talking about this on the way out. You can teach and you can train, but there is a culture everywhere you go. There's a culture in your life, there's a culture in your family, a culture in your home, a culture at work, a culture in this congregation. Whatever the culture okays is what's going to happen. Doesn't matter what you teach.
Say that one more time.
It doesn't matter. There's teaching and there's training and there's culture. Okay. So we can teach, and we can teach about what's right. And we can even train people that way. And training means, we give them a lot of strict teaching. But if the culture okays something, or or says it's not okay, whatever the culture says, that's what the person's going to do. And feel okay about it. So the illustration we used on the way out here was, we were talking about how things have changed since we grew up, way back in the, we were born in 47, so a long time ago, right? Gas stations were gas stations, right? You pull up and get $1 worth. Anybody remember that? You know, that was probably 5 gallons at the right time. You know? Now $1 worth. Like one of my friends was, he was an attendant at a gas station, and every time somebody say they wanted $1 worth, he said, "Where are you going, Florida?" You know, you really should put a little more gas in it. I remember some people were really struggling financially, and they're always out of gas. Some of them think, right? Why don't we do it that way? Why don't we start that? Okay, let's keep putting $1 worth on top. So, what was I saying?
Tell about culture.
Yeah, the culture. And so on the way out here, we were talking about one of the things, you know, gas stations were gas stations. I think the lowest price I remember was 17 cents a gallon. That's the lowest one I can remember. On a wedding trip, they were in the 20s, I think, and motels cost, a really nice one was $14, you know. We had some cheap ones for $6 that we shouldn't have stopped there, you know. $14 right all the way to Florida and back. You know. So, but one of the things, it was wrong to eat out on Sunday, right? Well, first of all, we didn't go eat out anytime, right? Except on strange, rare occasion. But what about eating in a restaurant on Sunday? That was not okay. Well, we still teach that it's not okay, but does the culture accept it? Yeah. How, I mean, if you teach it for 8 hours a day and try and train people, if the culture says it's okay, you might as well save your breath. So whatever controls the culture will control the behavior. So how can we change the culture to eliminate this idea that, you know, big boys molest little boys and men molest girls, and it's going on. I mean, the rate of that sort of thing in the church is as high as it is in the world. So we had, I don't know how many speakers over this last weekend, some medical doctors, some people trained in sociology, farmers like me, stuff like that. But how can we change that culture, that this is just wrong? So we'll be talking about that tomorrow, so if you have some ideas for me, that would be good to hear. Well, Joel, what are your thoughts?
I just wanted to hear if you have any insights into some of the saying, or what some of what you said was helpful.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm pretty sketchy on it, so.
So what kind of ideas are they thinking about to change the culture?
Well, the way we raise our sons is going to be a big part of it. The way we raise the boys. Can we raise the boys to be men? Or can't we? Or do they stay boys all their lives? And part of what the way I've been trying to teach men over the years is that we need to make a transition from being boys to being men. Now, how does that happen? Somewhere between 8 years old, 12 years old, this has to happen. If it doesn't happen, we stay boys the rest of our life. And we're adolescents. Doesn't work. So the way I'm approaching that is to try and entail the men, the fathers, that you have to, one of my friends says, I'm interrupting here. One of my friends says the mother gives birth to the infant boy, but the father gives birth to the adult man. So that and our mothers, I'm getting off on my lecture here. Our mothers love us so dearly, right? Any mothers here with boys? You know, I mean, the boys walk on water, right? But at the same time, mothers have to be a little bit careful of, you know, buttering the bread when they're 17, you know, that can go a little bit far here. This stuff is going on, okay, and then these boys get married and they think their wife's gonna do that too, you know? And maybe not, okay, or up some parent-to-child conversation. So I'm saying to fathers, you need to model the way you treat their mother, the way you treat their sisters. You're modeling for them how to treat girls. Okay? And also, the way you come in the house, you bring your sloppy boots in, you bring your manure boots in the house, or, you know, do you leave a trail from the front door to the bedroom of your socks and shirt and everything else? Or do you clean up, okay? And so whatever you're doing, that's a culture. And you're giving the boy the culture that's how you're supposed to live. So men are gonna have, I think men are gonna have to do this. I think the ladies are long overdue wanting it, okay? And so if we as men can do this, and we can say to your son, hey, what you just said to your mother is not okay. You apologize right now, okay? Get this boy up against the wall a little bit. I mean, now I'm talking like somebody from the 60s, right? I had to be careful as a school teacher, because I had parents come in and talk to me the way I treated their children, not girls, but boys. I said, did you find any bruises on him? No, we looked. Oh, I know you did, okay. No, I never bruised anybody, but I did stop a couple of people when I was 40 years old instead of 70 years old. Somebody's gonna have to do that. You just cannot have boys kicking the walls out and think they're gonna turn into men who are gonna treat girls decently. They won't do it. So if we can get this, I'm telling you the way I'm thinking we can change the culture. We can get our hearts. Malachi says, I'm going to send you Elijah the prophet, who's going to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, hearts of the children to the fathers. Working with young people all these years, many times that is not happening. Father does not have the heart of his son or his daughter. And if they don't, we're wasting our time. But if a father has the heart of his son, and he models it, and he requires it, we can change the culture.
What does that say when the father is absent? You know, I run into a lot of homes where there's no father.
Yeah. Well, we talked about that one of these nights when we looked at will and spirit, breaking the will but not the spirit, okay? And so when you don't have a father, there's nobody there to guide that will. And that will remains unbroken and unguided, okay? And those people are hyper dangerous, okay? They will kill you. That's what's going on. So we were made to grow up with a mother and a father. And if by some major problem that's not true, we have the family of God where we have spiritual fathers and spiritual mothers and spiritual brothers and sisters to help us raise ourselves and our children and so on. But that in the world is not happening. So, and it's just bumped into this again, and I saw it again today. So you get a girl who gets married, has a baby, can't get along with her husband, and she goes on welfare. If she goes on welfare, she can get assistance for the rent and food because she has children. If she gets married, she can't get it. Do you think she's gonna get married? No. She's gonna live with a boyfriend, right? Can this work? Can't work. Hopefully it doesn't ever happen in the church. Yet the people I'm talking about were raised in plain churches. And so we have our work cut out for us. We're gonna change the culture, and we can. God can change the culture. But we're gonna look like islands in the world. That's already happening. I mean, just finding employees is becoming a major problem, right? Why? Because people don't know how to work. Working for a multinational company, talking to people who work for multinational companies. They'll hire people and they'll last a half a day. They'll come in, lunchtime, they have enough of this, gone, right? Yeah. So, what you're seeing is now the plain people, especially the plain Amish and Mennonites, are people who do a day's work for a day's pay. And their services are in such high demand, constantly. And they're doing almost everything. So we're gonna be, yeah. Well, I had on your paper, although I did not hand out a handout, about Elijah, God and Elijah. So I would recommend that you would read that story. It goes on and on and on about the man who God had called from 1 Kings 17 to 2 Kings 3, and all the victories he had. And even though he had all those victories, along comes Jezebel, and there's lots of trouble. Okay. And as he goes along, he's discovering he's working for a very strong woman. That's not a handout. It is on your paper. Let's see where it's at. It's on this paper, maybe the second page, and topics, or the syllabus continued topics. Number 1, the last one is God and Elijah. Anybody see that? Okay. So it's something you can read and just kind of outline it as you go. I wound up with 3 or 4 pages. And what you see is that he gets himself in emotional distress, he gets himself in spiritual distress, and sometimes God just tells him, you need to sleep, okay? And you need to eat some food. It's just amazing how he goes through this. And Elijah is exhausted. He runs for his life. He sits down and says, I'm the only one left. And you know, I've done everything I can for God. I'm the only one left. I guess I'll just die. And God sends an angel, says, hey, maybe you want to get up and eat a little bit here. And then you should sleep, okay? And this happens twice when he gets so low. And eventually, God says, you know, you're not the only one. I have 7,000 men who have not bowed the knee to Baal. So he goes out and finds one of those men, who was Elisha, okay? And Elisha asks for a double portion of the Spirit. And so we need some Elijahs and some Elishas to change the culture. Joel, I think I'm about done. You said you want to close here. So anybody else want to say anything? Oops, sorry. About anything we talked about on these 4 times together?
Well, Elisha was a man of God, but he also ran in fear.
Well, when a lady tells you she's going to kill you, what would you do?
He stood up against the 400 guys out there.
That's why we should study this. Yeah. Yeah, he had so many victories. I mean, the kings of oil and the prophets, you know, and deliverance and running. Well, hopefully we never get there, right? To that depression where he was. All right.
Well, I trust all of us have been edified tonight, as well as some of the previous sessions. I know I have, and we want to thank Brother Frank for his willingness and his faithfulness in presenting this material to us. For me, it was a second time around to hear some of this, but it was presented differently, and I felt like I benefited greatly from this series of sessions, as much or perhaps more than the first time around. And I also felt the smaller class setting was also different and perhaps an advantage this time. It was a little more intimate. We had more discussion, as I recall, and this was very helpful. Trust it has been for you all as well. And we just want to give God the glory and thank each one of you for coming out and making this a success. Again, we thank the Pleasant Hill congregation for making the facilities here available. We thank the technical people for their assistance. That is greatly appreciated, and we just thank them for being willing to come out each session and make this possible. And so I believe that takes care of everything. And with that, let's close in prayer. Let us stand. Lord God Almighty, we give you thanks and praise for another beautiful day. We thank you for this opportunity to be here again this evening. We thank you for this opportunity to study your word together and to hear this material presented by Brother Frank, to be better equipped in helping those around us and even perhaps even understanding our own lives and the challenges that we face, so that we can also then be better equipped to help others. And we just thank you, Lord, for each one who's come this evening and the other sessions as well. We thank you for the lessons that we've learned, the ways in which we've been challenged, and even given material to study in the future and to become better equipped as well in that way. I pray, Lord, that you would give us a desire to continue learning, to study your word, and to draw out its lessons that we can learn from time to time. We just thank you, Lord, for the way you have guided our lives, brought us to this point, and we trust you for the future, that you will continue to lead us and guide us and order our steps and equip us for the work that you've called us to do. We know, Lord, that we have divine appointments day by day. We are reminded of that many times. As we interact with people, we recognize that you put us in situations for a purpose, and you allow us to learn, and you allow us to be successful as well in many of those situations. And so, Lord, we just pray that you would give us wisdom, grace, and guidance as we go through life's journey, day by day. We know, Lord, that you would not just have us to be busy, but that you would have us to be effective in what you've called us to do. And so, Lord, we pray that for each one here this evening, that we would be effective in helping people learn who they are and who you would have them to be as we interact with people from time to time. And so dismiss us with your blessing, Lord, now, and make us a blessing to others, and help us to be faithful to you and to live out the principles in your word day by day as we train our children and as we just reflect your character to those round about us day by day. Forgive us, Lord, when we fail and come short of doing your will. We fail many times, but we know, Lord, that you are a forgiving God, and you give us new opportunities. And we thank you for your Son, the Lord Jesus Christ, the one who's made it all possible. And we thank you for his life and for his example and for the strength that your Holy Spirit gives each and every day. And so thank you, Lord. Make us a blessing. And these things we pray and ask in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen. You're dismissed. Thank you for coming tonight.